Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, adnistana. It's a pleasure, as always, to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio and continuing our journey of light and knowledge. In this particular segment of Points of Light Radio, we will be going further into the discussion of anti-Masonic conspiracy theories. And we'll also be researching a political party that was literally set up as a result of these anti-Masonic conspiracy theories and hysteria of their time. And that political party was literally called the Anti-Masonic Party. Just to give you some background, the Anti-Masonic Party was the very first third party in the United States. Originally, it was set up as a single-issue party. It was strongly opposed to Freemasonry within the United States and was active from the late 1820s, particularly in the northeastern states. The Anti-Masonic Party later attempted to become a major party by expanding its platform and taking positions on other issues, right? Now, this is going to be interesting. But as I always ask you, are you still thirsty for knowledge? Are you still searching for the light? Then you just trim your lamp and follow me. Let's start with a quick excerpt from a interview I did with my friend and fellow podcaster, Joseph Benton. You know, that's one thing I've asked numerous times though on my podcast, and maybe you could throw your opinion on this though. You know, we all understand that the men who signed the Declaration of Independence, all these different documents down there, the Constitution, there's that big thing about, you know, they were Masons.
Yes.
And I've asked this numerous times during the course of my podcast, where I'll be mentioning that this president, for instance, was a Freemason, but he was also an elk, or he was also a moose. How come we remember that these guys were Masons, but a lot of them were odd fellows? A lot of them were belonged to various different fraternal organizations, Eagles and so on. Why is it that that never pops up, but this Masonic thing does constantly?
Well, the reason why, if you ask me, is because there are lots of movies that are made about the Masons that are mysterious and intriguing, pretty much because of the things that you're talking about. You know, there was no fraternal organization that had as many members involved in the founding of the United States. It's just a fact. You know, the Masons have been around longer, to my knowledge, because we don't really know for sure. But I would say pretty, you know, I think a pretty educated guess would be that since so many people who founded the country, our founding fathers, were Masons, that they were, you know, far more active than anybody really knew. I mean, look, you know, recently I discovered how it is that in Scotland, you know, their revolution that they tried to return the Bonnie Prince to the throne and all this stuff, there were Masons that were involved in that intrigue. And so the Masons have played a role in a lot of different, very large, influential events in history in Europe. And so it's not a big surprise that they had something to do. And I don't mean it's the Masons, like the organization of the Masons didn't tell these guys to do these things, but they just so happen to have this sort of back channel that allowed them to organize and coordinate that wasn't publicly accessible.
Moving forward, brothers and sisters, the Anti-Masonic Party was formed following the disappearance of a gentleman named William Morgan in 1826. Mr. Morgan was a former Mason who had become a prominent critic of Freemasonry and had prepared a book that was believed to reveal the secrets of the craft. Many believed that members of the craft had murdered Morgan for speaking out against Freemasonry. Now, this led many churches and other groups to speak out against Freemasonry. Due to the fact that many Masons were prominent businessmen and politicians, the backlash against the craft was also a form of rebellion against societal elite. Let's be blunt. We've often seen this down throughout history, like anti-establishment movements, right? Many anti-Masons believed that Freemasonry posed a threat to American republicanism and was secretly trying to control the government. There was also a fear and a belief that Freemasonry ran contrary to the Christian faith. When anti-Masonic candidates proved successful in the 1828 state and local elections, politicians saw the issue's vote-catching possibilities. For example, although the anti-Masonic candidate for governor of New York State, named Solomon Southwick, was defeated, the party itself became the main opposition party to the Democrats in New York State. Anti-Masonic newspapers were also flourishing in the heated political climate of the time. For example, a newspaper editor named Thurlow Weed formed the Anti-Masonic Inquirer. By 1829, Mr. Weed's Albany Journal had become the preeminent anti-Masonic newspaper, and it later became the leading Whig newspaper. In 1831, William A. Palmer was elected governor of Vermont on an anti-Masonic ticket. Besides Mr. Palmer, Joseph Ritner became the governor of Pennsylvania from 1835 to 1839. But governor was the highest office held by a member of the Anti-Masonic Party. The Anti-Masonic Party elected no senators and controlled no state houses. However, anti-Masons in the state legislatures sometimes formed coalitions to elect senators and organize their chambers. In September of 1831, the Anti-Masonic Party held a national convention in Baltimore, Maryland, and it nominated William Wirt for president and announced a party platform condemning Masonry for its secrecy, exclusivity, and undemocratic character. Now, Wirt won only the state of Vermont with its 7 electoral votes in 1832, and the party went into decline after that. By the late 1830s, much of the Anti-Masonic Party's reform impulse had been taken over by the anti-slavery movement, and most of its members and politicians had joined the newly formed Whig Party. The Anti-Masonic Party disappeared after 1838. So, what do you think, brothers and sisters? Let's break this down. The anti-Freemason Party had its roots in conspiracy theories, primarily the claim that Masonic elites were trying to secretly control the government. Now, does some of that sound familiar? Right? Now you've heard me say in previous segments of Points of Light, or you've heard me ask, what is it about Freemasonry that leads to these kind of conspiracy theories? Okay, why not the RAOB, Odd Fellowship, the Elks? Why always Freemasonry? Well, Mr. Benton posited that there may have been some truth to Masonic conspiracy theories, right? Now, let's be blunt. Like most good cover stories, all conspiracy theories, pretty much all of them, have their basis in a certain, I'm going to be careful when I say that, a certain level of truth. Okay? Prime example. Now, politics is not supposed to be discussed within our lodges. Does that mean it isn't? From experience, not necessarily, but it is discouraged. I personally don't go to lodge to discuss politics, right? Right? Do people form bonds in lodges? Yes, they do. If a brother from my lodge or the organization my lodge belonged to was running for election in my area, would I vote for him? Possibly, but you want to hear me say it? Not necessarily. However, let's move that a little bit. Would I be more likely to vote for that candidate from my organization in 1828 when the Anti-Masonic Party was formed? Now, there is a much stronger chance that I would back then, and I'll tell you why. The world was, and you've heard this said here before, the world was a smaller place back then, right? Information wasn't readily available, and these fraternal, familial, and religious bonds went a lot further and meant a lot more in 1828, right? But like many one-issue parties, the Anti-Masonic Party was just a flash in the pan, okay? And it ceased to exist, put it this way, by 1840, right? And you saw these types of parties, prime example, Ross Perot and his party in 1992, I believe it was. He had a very strong showing, right? And his party pretty much disappeared within 4 years or so, right? Now, a lot of his ideas were picked up on both by Republicans and Democrats, for that matter, after the 1992 election, right? Here in Canada, I do recall the Reform Party having a very strong showing in the 90s. Now, the furthest they ever got was the official opposition in our parliament, but they were eventually forced to amalgamate with other parties, much like you see here with the Anti-Masonic Party. But their ideas were picked up on even by the governing Liberal Party at the time, right? And you saw this all over the world, these one-issue parties, right? But sadly, many of these irrational theories still do exist. The prime example, the Occupy Wall Street movement of 2008, 2009 was based around a conspiracy theory. I mean, there was a tiny basis of truth to what their cause, but it was really conspiracy theory. The January 6th, I believe it was, 2020, riots on Capitol Hill in the United States were largely based around a conspiracy theory, let's be honest, okay? Now, to sum up, we can't allow these conspiracy theories or fears, and let's be blunt, that's really what they are. These are fears, right? These are individuals who are playing on people's fears, okay? And we cannot allow these conspiracy theories and fears, okay, to influence our behavior or our politics. We can't allow these conspiracy theories to influence, for that matter, our shopping, where we do or don't worship, or whether or not we join a lodge. We need to make these, we need to study these things right? And make decisions for ourselves and not base them simply around a fear, okay? And I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this, right? Before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, let us not be ruled by fear, and until we meet again, just step into the light.